welcome back to the programme. Good to have you with us this morning. Now, the UK has seen a rise in stabbings, but could deadly knife attacks be predicted before they actually happen? That's the thought of Detective Inspector John Massey, who found a link between the stabbing locations that happened in one year and the incidents that happened the following year. It's after research was carried out alongside the University of Cambridge criminologists. The study found 67% of the killings had been in places where there had been at least one stabbing the previous year. Well, let's get some more on this with Christian Foley. He joins us now via London. He's a spoken word educator, which means he's a global freestyle musician, poet, writer, and he works in schools and prisons in London. He's changed the perception of what we mean by excluded children. Morning to you, Mr. Foley. Thanks for being with us this morning. Now, you've spoken about having children arrive in your classrooms bleeding from knife attacks. What do they say happened to them when they come in like this? And what do you say to them?
It's kind of an open secret that we both know what happened from both sides, but they will never say that they've been stabbed. They'll say they fell on a knife in the kitchen. They'll say it was something else. Often they'll try and hide the wound by stuffing tissues down their tracksuit or whatever. So as teachers now, we're having to become almost paramedics and then take them to hospital and stuff like that. And when we entered the profession initially, it wasn't to do those kind of things, but now that is becoming part of the role, as it is to become a counsellor or a social worker. So
what do you think the biggest cause of this new knife crime epidemic, if you like, is?
In a way, it's not a new knife crime epidemic. The media are portraying this as a sudden spike or an explosion in knife crime, where it's not. It's the accumulation of a long term of cutting youth services, and after about 10 years this is always going to happen, this growing problem. It all comes down to, I mean, obviously it's multifaceted, there's so many factors, but all of those factors are united by one, which is poverty. Knife crime does not happen in areas of affluence, it happens in deprived areas. So if you could fix the poverty of the UK, that would be a start to preventing the knife crime.
Now, your work helps children through music, through poetry. I just want to play a clip that we have of one of your performances.
And if there is a God, then may they bless and you rest. P.S. I have two registers in my head, one for the living and one for the dead. I say your name, and I say your name again. No violence, just heart, the beat, flatline silence. He who taught me that we could never save him. For if we don't teach code breaking, what's the point of education?
I mean, that image of a register for the living and dead is really very powerful. What kind of psychological toll does this take on the children that you're dealing with, and how does your work help?
The toll it takes is massive, but often it's not delved into. A lot of children, particularly this is a predominantly masculine problem, and there's something that happens with boys growing up where they feel unable to articulate how they feel, or they feel that in doing so they're expressing a sign of weakness, and they're growing up in areas where you can't be vulnerable and you can't be weak, so people kind of keep this in. My work is finding a way for these children to be able to communicate, and I do that through the medium of music, where they feel it's a comfortable and safe space to come to my studio to be able to talk about what's happened. We're seeing children essentially suffering PTSD. They're essentially suffering the same kind of psychological conditions that you would if you came out of a war zone, because they're living under high adrenaline situations almost all of the time, to the point where prison is not a deterrent. Prison is actually a lot safer for them, and so they feel they go to prison for carrying a knife. That's acceptable because it would be a place of safety. And they carry knives not because they want to kill, generally speaking. They carry knives because they fear for their lives. And it's this whole climate of fear that has permeated, an entire city and an entire nation, really.
Yeah.
And these children are highly scared.
Now, how do you challenge stereotyping at work and in society? One man is challenging the narrative surrounding black men through his photography.
Yeah, our next guest, Cephas Williams, has started a campaign to change that narrative for black men after seeing negative portrayals of his community in the media with pictures like that.
Yeah, his photography series is called 56 Black Men. It aims to shine a light on the people doing positive work in the community. And he's with us now. Good to see you. Thanks very much for coming in. So tell us more about the work you do and how you're working with businesses to challenge these stereotypes.
Cool. So we started the campaign last year. I launched it just a few days before Christmas. The day after Christmas, it went viral. Had over 300,000 impressions with a few images. And I said to you, kind of offset, you know, the hoodie is part of the artistic direction, and race plays a big part here. And my mission really was around the next generation and this idea that black boys growing up very rarely get to see themselves amplified in a positive light in the newspaper. And I say here, you know, show a black man one thing over and over and over and over again, and perhaps that's what he shall become. Yeah. You know, and how do we start to diversify this story? And so the response, you know, artistically was to do this portrait series, but the conversation is much broader than that. And that's
what do you expect from businesses and business then to help in that sort of a project? What is their responsibility?
It's a great question. So for me, I say in the programs and now, you know, talking to companies about doing, the negative portrayal of black men in the media almost puts black men at a disadvantage when it comes to conversations around the workplace. So whether it be black boys and black men growing up not feeling like they fit into the working environment, and on the flip side, you've got the corporate world and the working environment also having a particular perception about black men. So whether black men are wearing hoodies or not wearing hoodies, you know, there are, you know, microaggressions, underlying notions that, you know, people within corporate and the wider society carry.
But Steve, it's just one thing. I mean, it wouldn't matter who's wearing a hoodie.
Yeah.
It by and large, if you take one or two famous names out of the equation, people don't turn up for business meetings in hoodies, do they?
Sure.
I mean, is there a danger that you're sort of conflating two things here?
So it's interesting. So for me, it depends on which world you work in, right? Because I go to meetings sometimes in casual clothing, sometimes I don't, you know, and I know high net worth earner friends and, you know, people that run their own businesses that also go to meetings in casual clothing and don't. And I don't want people to get convoluted by the conversation of the hoodie or not the hoodie. The real conversation is about the skin colour and the fact that black men have been demonised almost for what would seem like my whole lifetime in the media. And, you know, the hoodie being the artistic piece, me understand that, you know, once I presented it in this way, I wouldn't have to explain much. And the story in the piece resonated. Now, to answer your question about how organisations can get involved, the programme we're doing is coined as what I call an experience exchange piece. And how do we actually start to help black men and black boys actually appreciate that they're good enough? And also, how do we start to get organisations to start to look at black men differently, regardless of what they're wearing? And, you know, you've got the narrative of a black man walks into the office, or black people in general, listening to one particular type of music, and they almost have to come into the office and become someone completely different. And how do we start to talk about culture and inclusion and, you know, actually getting black boys and black men to be comfortable and fit into the working landscape a bit better.
So tell us more about your programme then to challenge that, to make a difference, because it's a business at the end of the day.
Yes.
You've got a two-pronged approach for next year. One's a sort of live thing and the other is selling your idea into businesses. So what do they actually have to do?
Great question. So the 56 Black Men Live piece wants to bring storytelling and performance arts to the stage. Part of our mission is to put black men at the forefront of that conversation. And so that's 56 Black Men Live. And with the programmes, we're looking at workshops, we're looking at mentorship pieces, we're looking at events held in these corporate companies to almost open the door with regards to the conversation around the black community and particularly black men.
And do you think, sorry, Sam, do you think the door is there to be pushed open, or are you finding it difficult?
Well, I was going to ask
That's a great question. There we go. So, you know, for me, what's been a success with my journey, I've been doing business for about 11 years and I've built up a really senior contact list as such. And I've made some really key allies. And, you know, with what I did with 56 Black Men, it really pushed that conversation from our perspective to what I call a primary agenda. And I'm going to break down something really quickly. So I feel like we've changed the narrative on a primary agenda, which I think generally involves government and media. And I feel like when we articulate something at primary, it can affect what I call secondary, which is what I would coin as, you know, organisations and culture. And then we're looking at tertiary, which is more grassroots. And what we've had a disconnect with in the black community specifically, and for men, is not a strong or solid enough primary agenda. And so now what we're starting to see in organisations is people are calling me and saying, you know, thanks for finally saying black. because for the longest time in the workplace, I felt like I wasn't allowed, and I had to say BAME, or I had to say something else.
Yeah.
And there's a beauty in
just
compartmentalising
on
lived
that,
experiences.
really simply, when you knock on the door of businesses, are they opening it, or are you still finding it's a difficult push?
It's a difficult push, you know what I mean? And what's been a success for what I've done is people are actually allies and are not afraid of compartmentalising the conversation. You know, the issue is that a lot of people, you know, we're very happy to talk about black men when it's negative, but when we're starting to do stuff to solve the problems and to actually start to be positive, it's like, let's not be so specific. And we need to get over that. We need to start being more specific, because actually, you know, change won't really happen until we're honest, and the heart knows the truth when it's spoken. And it's about us creating more inclusive, more true and more reflective workplaces led by people who understand the lived experiences of the people they're trying to help.
It's a big challenge.
Yeah.
Big challenge. More power to your elbow, though. Good luck. Thanks very much.
Thanks a lot.